I want to go across now to Brian Schmidt. He's a Nobel Prize winner and the Vice-Chancellor of the Australian National University. Thank you very much, Professor Schmidt, for speaking with us. Before I get to the joint statement, and there's a lot of wonder at how the negotiators managed to find this common language that's acceptable to all and to adopt it by consensus, I want to talk about this economic corridor because a lot is being made about it. The announcement by India, the United States, Saudi Arabia, UAE, France, Germany and Italy, backed by the European Union, to have this economic corridor, which is not just a land-based one or a rail one. It could also be for optic fibers. It could also be for transmitting data, transmitting gas. What do you make of such an ambitious project that was announced on the sidelines of the G20 here? Because many are saying that this is a direct challenge to the Belt and Road Initiative of China, the signature foreign policy move of Xi Jinping. How do you think this is being viewed in Beijing? Is it the G20 sort of throwing the gauntlet at China?
Well, I guess from my perspective, it's a good thing. We need India to contribute to the world's economy. We need to get India firing on all cylinders. And so I don't necessarily see it has to be in conflict with China. We need, if we're going to have a prosperous world, we need China and India both doing well. And so, yeah, a little competition is good, but I think we should see it actually in a very positive way.
But Professor Schmidt, the view from Beijing is that you look at, the wider region, in the backyard of China, if you will. You have the Quad, you have AUKUS, now you have this economic corridor that's stretching all the way from India through Arabia into Europa, as many are calling it. China would look at it and feel like this is a case of encirclement, if you will. This is a case of trying to stop China's rise. You have the United States allies like South Korea and Japan already in a consensus that we saw at the Camp David a few weeks ago. So wouldn't the view from Beijing on this be that while America and India and Australia and other countries accuse China of hegemonic behavior, what they are effectively doing is to encircle China?
I think we can always look at things from a point of view of conflict and of strategic adversarialness. And so in the end, what I see going forward for the next 20, 30, 40 years is the world needs to come to terms with global sustainability, is we're going to have to learn to cooperate. And so, yes, you can look at it through a containment of China lens, but it needs to happen to have both China and India thrive and prosper. So, as I said, in the world today, people like to see it as a conflict. I'm a glass half empty type of person, only rarely. So I really want to look at this from a positive point of view as a chance for India to assert itself and, really taking a front foot approach to helping the world get done what needs to happen over the next 20 or 30 years.
I do want to talk a little bit, Professor Schmidt, about the joint statement. The fact that it actually came through 12 hours before the joint statement came through. Even the negotiators were not hopeful that it will, but finally it did. And there are about 8 or 9 paragraphs on the Russia-Ukraine war, about 8 paragraphs, ending with, of course, the famous words by Prime Minister that this is not the era of war, this is an era of peace. There is a view, which is, of course, Ukraine is saying it publicly, but some others are saying it in private as well, that Russia has not been named directly in any of those paragraphs. And that's perhaps what clinched it. But they're saying that this is a dilution of Russia's transgressions. This is a dilution also from the Bali Declaration that happened a year ago. How would you read it?
Well, it shows how difficult it is to reach consensus in a large group of 20 nations, or in this case, sort of 19. It is, to my mind, it's probably not as strong as perhaps I would have liked to have seen. But on the other hand, I see the intent of the vast majority of the G20 is clear. The Ukraine war is clearly singled out as something that is bad and needs to be rectified. And so I wouldn't be thinking it gives Russia any happiness that it's somehow off the hook. Indeed, it's a bit of a vice, I think, coming down, but it is, I think, a lost chance for maybe a little bit more strength from the G20, but perhaps not surprising. These are just very, very different.
I do want to sort of look at the arc of the near future, as it were, as you described it, over the next 10, 20, 30 years. If this great power contestation between the United States and its partners on the one side and Russia and China on the other side, and you may want to sort of simplistically draw the line as democracies versus autocracies, I'm just curious to know if that is the trajectory, and if the Delhi G20 in a way has also shown the light that, look, it's not just about these two powers of this great power contestation. There's also a wide world out there called the Global South. And yesterday, with the induction of the African Union, India has stamped that these two warring sides, many are calling this the new Cold War or what have you, will have to take into consideration vast swathes of the globe which don't want to pick a side, which don't want to get stuck in this great power competition.
I hope not, but that's certainly the way we're going. And the reason I hope not is that if we are going to deal with global sustainability, we cannot be spending all of our effort in conflicts, of duplicating things. We need China to be delivering the incredibly efficient manufacturing it does, for example, of solar cells. And it would be great if India comes online and can do that as well. More competition, more technology. That is all a good thing. If we end up going through and essentially containing China, I mean, Russia's quite frankly not much of a partner. It's quite a small economy. It's not going to be very useful except for, quite frankly, nuclear weapons going forth. So I don't think that's a winning strategy for China either. We are clearly in the West concerned about China and what it may do. I think we don't yet have trust built up that it's going to be a long-term partner that's not going to do, I think, things that surprise us. Its activity in the South China Sea certainly sends all the wrong signals to everyone. But I do believe we have to find a way to work economically together, or we are all going to suffer in the next 20 or 30 years. It's just really the only way forward.
So let me get a final word. So if a confrontation were to happen, and we've seen one, just, the Russia-Ukraine war, which is still going on, if a confrontation were to happen, you're already seeing the pressures on the Malacca Straits. China is paranoid that the Malacca Straits will be closed in by the US and its allies. They are looking at the Quad. We know the tensions around the Taiwan Straits, of course. That again could flare up in a big way. And now you have a third possible point of contestation with this economic corridor. The Red Sea and the military bases that China has in the Red Sea have been pretty much rendered ineffective, because how can you contest with a coming together of Saudi Arabia, UAE, India, the United States, and Western European powers? China having bases in Djibouti would be of no value.
So it's difficult for me to understand exactly what the flashpoint will be. Clearly, Taiwan is the highest risk. And then the question is, how do we end up seeing these little corridors of power emerge? And that's going to depend a lot on the individual political regimes around the world and how they align themselves. And unfortunately, if we put ourselves on a path of conflict, then conflict will emerge somewhere. And history shows it's not necessarily predictable in advance, but you usually find a place for it to occur. You've mentioned around the seas and these places that China has, has its first bits of power around the world. Those are possible places, but honestly, I think it could occur anywhere. And that's why I think it's pretty important to try to de-escalate and try to find a way where we have economic cooperation, and we find a way for India, China, United States, and the rest of the world ultimately to play together in some sort of world order. Now, that world order is, back 75 years old now, and we need to look at a way to update it for India's benefit, but quite frankly, for the whole world's benefit.
All right, Professor Brian Schmidt, Vice-Chancellor of the Australian National University, thank you very much for joining us with your perspective into what has been achieved at the Delhi G20 summit. These two things are frankly huge. Some would say even seismic in the manner in which it's come about. The joint statement, the paragraphs on the Russia-Ukraine war, and of course, this economic corridor all the way from Asia through Arabia through into Europa, as some people are putting it. Let's take a quick break, but news and updates continue on the other side with my colleague, Brinda.